Hey, it's Larsson. FabFilter Pro-R is a crazy good reverb plugin that can be your daily driver, and not only for adding space to your sounds and mixes, but it allows you to push the boundaries of your sound design. Let me show you a few exciting things I was able to make relying heavily on the Pro-R. So, in this nice ambient-like pad, I used the built-in EQ to boost some frequencies so we can add a nice touch to the sound. What I really love in the Pro-R is the synchronizable pre-delay that you can use to fill up gaps in your rhythm track, something like this. The quality sound of Pro-R makes it possible to make very nice cinematic ambient sounds like this. I'm sure that these tips will inspire you to use Pro-R in your own creative way, so let's jump into it. After you see what this plugin can do, I'm sure you will want to add it to your library. You can grab Pro-R at the Warp Academy plugin store. I dropped the direct link in the video for you. Okay, so before we jump into it, let me analyze the interface, which is very simple and I really like it. And first of all, if you click on this icon, you can full screen Pro-R, which is a very handy feature. Now I prepared this sound. And let's start with the most obvious feature, the space. Which obviously sets the length of the tail of the reverb, but again, it also uses an algorithm, which you can see here, the very small room and the larger and even larger, etc. And at the end, you can see like a tempo kind of pictogram here, which represents that this is a very huge hall, very huge space. And obviously, if you tweak the space knob, you can set the length and the model. So this is a very cool thing. Now let's start with the brightness. So you can tweak the top end of the tail. You can set the character. Which acts like a chorus kind of filter to the reverb. So the more you crank up the character knob, the more your reverb will sound like if it was affected using a chorus. Now the distance is a very interesting and very cool way to tweak your reverb. Because with that you can set how far you want to perceive the sound using the reverb. Because if you pull it back, you perceive your sound playing a lot closer, and if you crank up the distance, it will sound if it was played from a very far distance. We talked about the space knob, and the decay rate is again a very interesting thing because the length of the reverb is set by two things, the decay rate and the space knob, because as you can see here, you can set the length of the reverb tail in milliseconds and you can subdivide it or multiply it by 2. So if you pull it back, your reverb tail will be subdivided by 2, or if you crank it up, your reverb tail will be multiplied by 2. You can set the stereo width if you want to have a mono reverb, just pull it back. If you want to have a full, bright, very wide reverb, just crank it up to the maximum. And also you can set the mix in percentage, which is a very basic thing. Now, the main interface is not about the knobs, because here you can see two curves. The orange one is a simple EQ, and as it says here, a post EQ. And the blue one, which is called a Decay Rate EQ. Now the post EQ is obviously a simple EQ, but it can be very handy, and in the first example I'm going to talk about it a little more. But the Decay Rate EQ is a very interesting thing that I actually never saw anywhere else in any other reverb plugin, because for example, in real places, lower frequencies last and plays a lot longer than higher frequencies, and basically every space, every room behaves a lot differently based on the reflections. And with Pro-R, you can set these reflections using this Decay Rate EQ. So for example, if you want to have more top end on the reverb tail when it starts to fade out, just crank up this curve, or if you want to have less, then pull it back. Or if you want to have more low end on your reverb tail when it starts to fade out, just crank it up, or if you want to have less, just pull it back. And the story does not end here, because you can create crazy stuff using the Decay Rate EQ. Now let me go back. So let's jump into the first example. Let me go back from full screen. And I prepared a very simple sound, which is basically a simple saw and an overdrive. And if I enable the FabFilter, it sounds like a trombone or something. Now, what really makes the sound is first of all the overdrive, but the post EQ. Because as you can hear, this peak really gives the tone of a trombone. Now, this is the thing that I used in this example. With this beautiful pad. I wanted to add this little peak to it, so the pad will have a lot more presence in the mix. Now it contains a very long tail on the reverb. As you can see, it is 10 milliseconds. And I set the distance to 66%. And the corrector is cranked up to almost to the maximum. And I didn't want to pull back the brightness because I wanted to have a little brighter reverb. Now with the decay rate, as you can see, I wanted to keep the very high frequencies at the end of the tail also. So I didn't want to fade the high frequencies out at the end of the reverb tail. So this is why I crank up the highs and the lows at the same time. So this is it. This is the first example. Just before we get going, I would like to invite you to join the community by hitting subscribe and activating notifications. That way you won't miss a beat and you will get the heads up all the things as soon as we post them. And the next thing that I want to show you, and this is actually my favorite thing in Pro-R, is the synchronizable pre-delay. Let me show it to you how it sounds on its own. So what I did here is I automated the mix knob. But the trick here is given by the pre-delay. So if you click here, you can set the pre-delay to 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, or even less to 1/4, or to a logged in milliseconds format. It is a very handy feature to set this pre-delay because, for example, in rhythm, this is a very common technique to play around with reverb and adding a nice groove, a nice rhythm. So this is a huge feature in Pro-R and I really love it. And about the settings, as you can see here, I use a very short decay time. It is 0.65 seconds. And because I didn't want to have any low end and any high end on the decay, I just wanted to have a little boost here at about 600 Hz. This is the curve that I used here. And once again, I modulated the mix knob, as you can see here. Okay, and the final thing that I want to show you is in the cinematic atmospheric effect kind of thing. So the goal was here to create a very long decay on this sound. And Pro-R is very capable of doing that, because as you can see, I was able to use 5 seconds, and if I wanted to have more, I just need to pull this decay rate knob up and I can have 20 seconds of reverb, which is huge. It is crazy good. Very, very cool. And what I did here is I used this auto pen to turn the sound, the reverb tail, into a sort of synth sequence. What I also did here is use the post EQ in Pro-R, and I started to filter out the very end, the very top, at the end of the sequence. So this way I was able to achieve a lot synthesizer sounding sound, and altogether the mix sounds pretty well. Okay, so as you saw, Pro-R is a lot more than a simple reverb plugin, mainly because its sound quality is so pristine. My favorite feature of it is the synchronizable pre-delay, which is so important in the modern bass music scene, plus how you can tweak the early refractions with the built-in EQ is very useful to achieve unique sounds. So these were my tips on FabFilter Pro-R. If you enjoyed this video, go and check Warp Academy's site for more videos, courses and even audio software. Peace!